Hello and good afternoon. I'm Don Arleth and you're watching World News coming live to you from Warsaw. Polish far-right MEP Grzegorz Braun has again lost his parliamentary immunity, this time over multiple criminal charges including assault, hate speech and vandalism. The European Parliament voted overwhelmingly to lift his protection, clearing the way for prosecutors to act. The European Parliament has voted to remove his immunity in connection with a second criminal case opened in 2025. Prosecutors in Wrocław accused Braun of assaulting and unlawfully detaining a gynecologist during an anti-abortion stunt back in April. He also faces charges for defacing posters belonging to an LGBTQ rights group in Opole and for inciting religious hatred in a 2023 online interview, during which he expressed his approval of extinguishing a Hanukkah menorah in Poland's parliament, an act that sparked outrage at the time. This marks the second time this year the European Parliament has lifted Braun's immunity. The first case in May involved 7 separate offenses, including assault and insulting public officials. If convicted, Braun could face multiple criminal penalties under Polish law. Ukraine's High Anti-Corruption Court has ordered Energoatom security chief Ihor Fursenko to be held in preventive custody until January 8th of next year. They also set his bail at $2.2 million. Investigators allege Fursenko was involved in laundering money while acting as a back office accountant in the $100 million energy sector corruption case.
The court decided to apply to the suspect, Ihor Leonidovich Fursenko, born on February the 16th, 1969, a preventive measure in the form of detention for a period of 60 days from the date of arrest, that is, until January the 8th, 2026. The bail for the suspect is set at $2.2 million. Bail may be posted by the suspect himself or by another natural or legal person into the account of the High Anti-Corruption Court.
President Zelensky vowed to overhaul the national nuclear energy operator Energoatom after a major anti-corruption probe uncovered wrongdoing in Ukraine's energy sector. In his nighttime address, Zelensky demanded full transparency and pledged his administration's support for investigators.
Today I had a detailed conversation with the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Ihor Fursenko. First off, there must be absolute transparency in the energy sector, without exception. I fully support every investigation by law enforcement and anti-corruption agencies. This is a clear and consistent position for everyone. No schemes. It is good that the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine will provide full assistance to the investigation and all judicial efforts. There will be a cleanup and reboot of the management of Energoatom.
EU finance ministers are meeting today to decide how to fund Ukraine for the next 2 years. One option, backed by the European Commission, is a loan secured by Russian state assets frozen at Euroclear in Brussels. Now for a report by our EU correspondent, Angela Skuchins.
Finance ministers from across the 27 EU member states have met in the Belgian capital to discuss how to finance Ukraine over the next 2 years. The options that are on the table comprise of a €140 billion reparations loan, joint debt or other grants to prop up the war-torn country's budget, expected to be €130 to €140 million. Now, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is championing the push, particularly for that reparations loan. It would work by using the cash proceeds from these frozen Russian state assets currently held at Belgian financial institution Euroclear to give Ukraine the loan. Once Russia pays Ukraine for the reparations, Ukraine then gives the money back to the Kremlin. However, the consternation mainly revolves around the Belgian Prime Minister Bart de Wever arguing that Belgium would be financially put at risk if Russia wants the money back or takes Belgium to court. He has stood by his demands from his European allies in which he wants them to share the risk as well as the guarantees. The European Commission President Ursula von von der Leyen outlined the plan for the reparations loan to members of the European Parliament. However, she stressed that the need to support the war-torn country has never been as paramount as Russia continues attacking Ukraine's energy infrastructure.
President Putin is again trying to terrorize the Ukrainian people, to use winter as a weapon to freeze Ukraine into submission.
So how does the EU's financing push be impacted by this fresh news coming out of the Ukrainian capital on Wednesday regarding another corruption scandal involving two senior cabinet ministers? TVP World put this question to those finance ministers as they made their way into that meeting early Wednesday morning. We asked them whether they were rattled by this news and whether it could impact the EU giving that reparations loan to Ukraine. The Danish economy minister, Stephanie Lose, said she expects Ukraine to keep up with its anti-corruption reforms. However, the deputy finance minister from Lithuania, Kristupas Vaitiekūnas, told TVP World that the news might have an impact on the reparations loan. However, the EU doesn't have many other options.
Ukraine is our only option, and it's fighting not only for its own freedom and the right to choose the way we live, but also for the freedom of Europe as well. So despite the scandal, there are no other options.
However, this is not the end of the dialogue for the reparations loan. A press conference is scheduled for 2:15 on Thursday, but it will be crunch time at the end of the year when those European leaders meet in December to have their final vote on how to financially support Ukraine as it weathers another year of Russian aggression. Angela Skujins from Brussels for TVP World.
We stand with Ukraine, said Germany's finance minister Lars Klingbeil, as he announced that Berlin will support the war-torn country with an additional €3 billion.
We have just come from budget consultations in Germany. In the finalization meeting, we will now allocate an additional €3 billion to strengthen Ukraine. This is important to us in Germany. We are Ukraine's biggest supporter in Europe, but we now need to find medium-term solutions for how we, as the European Union, can continue to actively support Ukraine as a whole. We are discussing what options are available. You are all aware of the discussion surrounding Russian assets, and we are now in the process of finding solutions. I am optimistic that we will succeed, but it is important that Europe also provide impetus in this area. No, we will not be intimidated by Russia. It is very clear that since the beginning of the war, attempts have been made to intimidate us. We have never allowed that to happen. We stand with Ukraine.
The United Nations General Assembly reaffirmed Ukraine's right to its full territory and condemned war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide as violations of international law. Former German foreign minister and current president of the UN General Assembly, Annalena Baerbock, told TVP World.
Well, in the latest resolutions, they have been repeating what they said from the beginning of this war, that Ukraine, like any other country in the world, has the right to its full territory. We had also had a debate yesterday with the International Criminal Court. They presented their yearly report, also reporting on the violation of international law with regard to the deporting of children from Ukraine territory with regard to arrest warrants. So the General Assembly has been clear on all these cases, but as you know, the world is turning over and over again, and resolutions are being rediscussed over and over again. So it's always up to every member state to recommit to the foundations of our charter, to recommit that the war of aggression, that war crimes, that crimes against humanity, that genocide are a deep violation of international law, and that the Charter is crystal clear that the UN has to stand up for peace and security, development and human rights.
Italian authorities have opened an investigation into so-called sniper tourists who allegedly paid Serbian soldiers to go on a human safari and target civilians, including children, during the siege of Sarajevo in the mid-1990s. Wealthy foreigners were to pay the equivalent of up to €100,000 to take part in these trips. Foreigners from Italy, the United States, Canada, Russia, Germany, France, and the United Kingdom are said to have taken part, driven by nothing more than their own perverse pursuit of pleasure. You can read more about this on our website at tvpworld.com. The captain of the Polish national football team, Robert Lewandowski, is certain that Poles will give their best on Friday as the country faces the Netherlands in the crucial game of World Cup qualifiers.
Our matches against the Netherlands are always close, that's true, and we've always lacked something. And the first thing that came to my mind was skills. Of course, I believe that in the end, these skills will not be lacking, and we will win the match against the Netherlands, especially since we have this match in Warsaw. I already miss the stadium and its atmosphere, and I'm already looking forward to this match. Do we have a plan for this meeting? Of course we do. I myself am curious about this idea of ours, how it'll look on the pitch, because we assume a rather important change.
And that concludes this edition of World News. Thank you for joining us, and stay with us for more here on TVP World.